You know, there are these moments in your life, the ones that feel like they are shut in golden hour, where everything is perfect, warm, and just full of promise. In those moments, you believe you truly know the people closest to you. You believe that no matter what problems you might have, there are certain fundamental lines, certain sacred trusts that would simply never be crossed. Well, I used to think so, too. My name is Corinne. I was 29 years old when my world fell apart. And this is the story of how I learned that some people, even the ones who share your blood, will do absolutely anything to get what they want. It all started on a crisp Thursday in March, a day that was supposed to be one of the best of my life. I had just come out of a marathon meeting with the executive board. I can still smell the stale coffee and dry erase markers in that boardroom. After 4 long, grueling years of working 60-hour weeks, of sacrificing weekends and holidays as a project manager at a major tech firm here in Austin, Texas, they had finally given me the news. My boss, a stern man who rarely smiled, slid a thick folder across the mahogany table. He looked me right in the eye and told me I was being promoted to commercial director. It was everything I had worked for. The title, the responsibility, the corner office. I remember walking out of that building and the Texas sun felt different on my skin. It felt like a reward. I could not stop smiling all day, feeling a lightness in my chest I had not felt in years. The first people I called, my voice bubbling with excitement as I sat in the driver's seat of my car, were my husband, Harlan, and my younger sister, Jolene. They were my world, the 2 people I wanted to share this victory with more than anyone. I dialed Harlan first. The phone rang 4 times before he picked up, background noise from the car dealership blaring through the speaker. I told him the news, my words rushing out so fast I had to take a breath. He sounded happy, maybe a little distracted, but he agreed to dinner. Then I called Jolene. She picked up right away. I told her about the promotion, and I announced into the phone, practically bouncing in my seat, that we were celebrating tonight. The Gilded Steer, my treat. The Gilded Steer was that classic upscale steakhouse downtown, the kind of place with dark wood paneling, deep leather booths, and waiters in starched white coats. It was the kind of place where a single steak costs more than a week of groceries, a symbol of a world I had fought tooth and nail to enter. But tonight, I could afford it. Tonight, I had earned it. I went home early to change. I took a long shower, washing away the stress of the boardroom. I stood in front of my closet and pulled out a brand new navy blue silk dress. I had bought it months ago, specifically for an occasion like this, hanging it at the very back of the closet so nothing would snag the delicate fabric. Harlan always said that color made my eyes pop. I did my makeup carefully, putting on a shade of red lipstick I saved for special nights. I wanted to look exactly how I felt, victorious. I arrived at the restaurant first, feeling a thrill of anticipation. I chose a quiet corner booth, a secluded little nook where we could have some privacy for our celebration. The dining room was buzzing with the low, confident hum of conversation from executives closing deals and elegant couples on expensive dates. For the first time, I felt like I truly belonged in that room. I ordered a glass of sparkling water and just watched the front door, waiting for my family. Then I saw them arrive, and a little knot of unease tightened in my stomach. They walked in together. Now, that was not entirely unusual. Austin traffic is terrible and sometimes people carpool, but it was the way they walked in. Jolene was absolutely radiant. She was beaming with a brilliant, almost manic smile I had not seen on her face in a long, long time. She looked flushed, alive, practically vibrating with energy. And Harlan. Harlan just looked nervous. He was a car salesman at a local dealership. Charming and good-looking, sure, but he always got a bit uncomfortable in places like this, fidgeting with his tie as if it were choking him. But there was something different about him that night. A tension in his shoulders, a darting look in his eyes that I could not quite name. He did not look like a man coming to celebrate his wife. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Jolene slid into the booth next to me. She enveloped me in a hug, her arm squeezing me with a strange, almost desperate affection. She was never the demonstrative type, especially not with me. We were sisters, but we were not the hugging type. It felt rehearsed. I pulled back and looked at her, but she just smiled wider. Still, I pushed the feeling down, determined to let nothing spoil my perfect night. I was eager to share my happiness with the two people I loved most in the world. We settled into the booth, the rich smell of aged beef and old money hanging in the air. We ordered a bottle of expensive wine, a bottle I had been wanting to try for ages. As the waiter poured the deep red liquid into our glasses, I launched into my news, my words tumbling out in a rush of pure joy. I looked across the table at Harlan, his eyes fixed firmly on the white tablecloth. I told them you will not believe the portfolio they are giving me. I will be handling the entire European expansion. It is a massive salary increase. My monthly income was jumping to $20,000, not even counting the performance bonuses. I leaned forward, trying to catch Harlan's eye. I told him we could finally start looking at houses. A real house with a backyard. I looked at him, expecting to see his handsome face break into a wide grin, expecting him to reach across the table and take my hand. But he just stared down at his glass, swirling the wine, his expression completely unreadable. His knuckles were white from gripping the stem of the glass. I turned to Jolene, trying to recapture the excitement. I told her I was thinking, with the extra money, I could finally help her with a down payment on a little studio of her own. Get her out of that cramped apartment she always complained about. As I talked, painting this beautiful picture of our future, a future I thought we would all share, I started to notice how strange their silence was. Jolene was listening with an unnerving intensity. Her eyes were wide, hanging on my every single word about my new salary and the bonuses. It was not pride I saw in her eyes. It was something else. It was something sharp and hungry. Harlan, on the other hand, could not sit still. He just kept folding and unfolding his heavy linen napkin. He smoothed it out on the table, folded it in half, then in quarters, then crumpled it up again. He had not said more than 2 words since they sat down. The festive atmosphere I had imagined was curdling into something heavy and suffocating. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. Actually, Jolene interrupted me. Her voice cut through my excited rambling like a shard of ice. We have some news to share, too. She reached across the heavy oak table. Her movement was slow, deliberate. I watched her hand move across the white cloth, past the salt shaker, past the bread basket, until her perfectly manicured fingers reached Harlan. She took his hand. My stomach did not just drop. It plummeted. It felt like the floor had just fallen out from under me, sending me into a cold, dark free fall. The cheerful buzz of the restaurant suddenly faded into a distant, muffled roar, like I was underwater. The warm, golden lights of the chandelier above us seemed to flicker and dim. I could not take my eyes off her hand, her fingers lacing through my husband's. It was a gesture of ownership, of intimacy that felt like a physical blow to my chest. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. My breath caught in my throat. I am pregnant, she said. Her voice was clear and steady. It was laced with a note of pure triumph. The world stopped. Literally. It was a punch to the gut that knocked all the air from my lungs. I could not breathe. I could not think. All I could do was stare at their linked hands resting so casually on the table. Pregnant. My sister Jolene was pregnant. I know this is a complicated situation, Harlan finally spoke. His voice was raspy, barely a whisper. He still could not look at me. His gaze remained fixed on a spot on the tablecloth near his water glass. But it just happened, Corinne. We fell in love. They both watched me then. Their faces were a bizarre mixture of nervous expectation and a poorly disguised smug satisfaction. It was as if they were waiting for the explosion. They wanted me to scream, to cry, to throw my wine in his face, to make a scene that would give the other tables something juicy to whisper about over their expensive desserts. They wanted a drama, and I was meant to be the hysterical star. But I could not do anything but stare. My brain refused to process the words. My sister. My little sister, Jolene. The one I had helped pay for her college fund when our parents could not swing it. She was sitting there holding my husband's hand, pregnant with his child. And they had chosen to tell me this here, tonight, on the night of my greatest professional achievement. It was not a confession. It was a calculated, cruel execution. My voice came out strangely calm. It sounded like a stranger's voice, devoid of any emotion. I asked them how long. Jolene's smile was victorious as she placed her free hand over her still flat stomach. 3 months, she replied. It started right after your birthday last year. My birthday. 3 months. I just stared at the wall behind them. 3 months of whispered phone calls. 3 months of secret meetings. 3 months of them laughing behind my back while I worked 12-hour days to get this promotion. I remembered my birthday party vividly. I had hosted a small barbecue at our condo. Harlan had been manning the grill. Jolene had been sitting on the patio chair, drinking a beer. I remembered Harlan handing her a plate of food, their fingers brushing. I had thought nothing of it. I was busy inside, making sure everyone had drinks, talking to my colleagues about work. This promotion I was so desperate to share with the very people who were gleefully destroying my life. I did not scream. I did not cry. I carefully placed my linen napkin on the table, stood up, and walked out of the restaurant. I did not look back. I just walked, putting one foot in front of the other until I reached my car. On the silent 20-minute drive home, the neon city lights of Austin blurring through the rain on my windshield, my mind became a frantic projector. It started flashing through years of little moments, little comments, little slights that suddenly clicked into place like a key turning in a lock. The rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers sounded like a ticking clock in the quiet car. Jolene had always lived in my shadow. And now I realized it had not just bothered her, it had consumed her. It had festered into a corrosive envy that had poisoned everything between us. I was the older daughter, the responsible one, the one who got good grades without seeming to try. She was the youngest, the spoiled one, the one our parents shielded from every hardship, always making excuses for her failures. But for some reason, it was never enough for her. We grew up in a modest middle-class family. Our dad was an accountant. Our mom a third-grade teacher. We never wanted for anything essential. But Jolene always acted like she was entitled to so much more. She truly believed she deserved the things I had, the success, the recognition, the money, just without putting in any of the backbreaking effort. To her, my success was not a result of hard work. It was about luck or favoritism or some cosmic injustice that gave me everything and left her with the scraps. I remembered when our grandfather passed away. At the funeral, while the rest of the family was mourning, Jolene was pulling relatives aside, complaining that she was not mentioned specifically in the small inheritance he left behind, ignoring the fact that the money was meant to help pay off our parents' mortgage. She made a funeral all about her perceived financial slights. I remembered the day I got my full scholarship to the university. While my parents were bursting with pride, cooking my favorite dinner to celebrate, Jolene had just sniffed, crossed her arms, and said, "Well, of course you did. You always have that kind of luck." When I graduated with honors and landed a great internship at a multinational firm, her comment was a backhanded remark about how I always knew how to sell myself. It was not a compliment, it was an accusation. The most telling memory was from 4 years ago, right after I bought my first condo. I was 25, bursting with pride over my first piece of real estate. A beautiful $550,000 condo in a great neighborhood. I had invited the family over to see it. While my parents marveled at the high ceilings and the small balcony overlooking the city, Jolene walked through the rooms with a critical eye. She ran her hand over the granite countertops I had been so proud of. I watched her from the doorway. She turned to me, her voice laced with something I mistook for awe. but now recognized as pure resentment. Aren't you worried about being a little too ambitious, Corinne? It is a long way to fall. Our parents, bless their hearts, had always tried to even things out in a way that only made it worse. When I bought my new, reliable sedan with my first big bonus, they scraped together enough to buy her a used car, just so she would not feel left out. When my salary started to climb into the six figures, they increased the money they secretly gave her to help with her rent. It was like they were trying to artificially compensate for my success by keeping her afloat, which only fueled her toxic sense of entitlement. She thought my wealth was somehow her inheritance, something she was owed just by existing in the same family. Now, her constant probing questions about my finances made a sickening kind of sense. "So, what is the interest rate on a mortgage like this?" she would ask when she visited, casually leaning against my kitchen island. "What is your salary now anyway?" "I am just trying to get a benchmark for the freelance market," she would lie, sipping the coffee I bought. As if her sporadic graphic design gigs were in the same universe as my corporate career. When I mentioned I was investing in stocks, she wanted to know specific amounts, which funds I was in. It was not sisterly curiosity. It was reconnaissance. It was pure unadulterated greed. And I had been too blind, too trusting to see it. And Harlan. Poor, simple, easily led Harlan. When I first introduced him to my family, Jolene had made it a point to pull me aside in the kitchen and say he was not my type. Now I knew why. He was not her type either. He was just her tool. He was her way in. He was the weak link she could exploit to get to what she really wanted. My life. I finally pulled into the parking garage of my building. I turned off the engine and just sat there in the dark for a long time, listening to the rain hit the concrete outside. I gathered my purse and walked to the elevator. I unlocked the door to my condo and stepped inside. The silence was deafening. The air was thick with the ghost of the life I thought I had. It was bizarre how your entire world could detonate and the physical space around you could remain so stubbornly, mockingly unchanged. Harlan's worn-out running shoes were by the door, exactly where he kicked them off yesterday. His favorite sports mug was sitting on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker. His toothbrush was still in the ceramic holder next to mine in the bathroom. I walked through the rooms, turning on every single light. Each object was a tiny, painful monument to a lie. I walked into the bedroom. I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed I had picked out, the bed I had paid for, still in my navy blue silk dress and heels, and just stared into the void. My brain, my overachieving, problem-solving brain, had finally short-circuited. There was no plan, no strategy for this. I knew I should be crying, screaming, throwing his clothes out the window onto the street below. But all I felt was a profound hollow numbness, like my soul had been scooped out, leaving an empty shell. I laid back on the mattress and stared at the ceiling fan. He did not come home that night, of course. Around 2 in the morning, my phone, which had been sitting silently on the nightstand, buzzed. The sudden vibration made me jump. I rolled over and picked it up. It was a text from him. A coward's message. "I am at Jolene's. We will talk tomorrow." Jolene's. Not your sister's house. Jolene's. He called her place like it was his home now. A familiar destination. As if our 4 years of marriage, our shared life, were just an inconvenient detour on his way to her. As if I was the obstacle that had finally been removed. I tossed the phone onto the floor. I spent the rest of the night awake, pacing the 1,200 square feet of the condo I had bought with my own money, trying to understand how I could have been so blind. I walked from the bedroom to the living room, to the kitchen, and back again. The signs were all there, were they not? Harlan working late more often in the last few months. Coming home smelling faintly of a perfume I did not wear, telling me the dealership was doing inventory. Jolene suddenly calling more frequently, asking about my schedule under the guise of sisterly chatter. Wanting to know exactly when I would be stuck in meetings. Them arriving at the restaurant together as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It all made a sickening kind of sense now. When the sun finally began to stream through the blinds, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor, I was still sitting on the couch. My beautiful dress was wrinkled, my makeup a smeared wreck. I felt physically ill, a deep ache in my bones. I picked up my phone from the floor. The screen showed 17 missed calls from my mother. Jolene, the master manipulator, had already called her. No doubt spinning some romanticized tragic tale of star-crossed lovers who just could not help themselves. She probably cried. She was good at crying. My mother's inevitable call came a few minutes later. I stared at the caller ID for a long time before I finally swiped to answer. "Corinne, honey," she began. Her voice was laced with a pained confusion, a hesitant tremor. Jolene told me. "Honey, these things are complicated. Love is a funny thing. And now there is a baby to think about." I felt a cold rage start to burn in my chest. A baby. That was her excuse for destroying my marriage. "Mom," I said, my voice harsh and brittle. "I cannot talk about this right now." "But Corinne," she pleaded. "She is your sister. She is scared. She needs." I pressed the end call button. I could not listen to her defend the woman who had just ruined my life. I threw the phone onto the couch cushion. I needed to move. I went into the bathroom, turned the shower on as hot as it would go, and stepped under the spray. I let the scalding water beat down on my back. I scrubbed my skin until it was red. I wanted to wash the entire night away. It was only then, under the roar of the water, that I finally broke. It was not a dramatic movie-style breakdown, but the quiet, exhausted sobs of someone who had just lost the two people she thought she could trust most in the world. I slid down the tiled wall and sat on the floor of the shower, crying until my throat felt raw. When I finally got out and wrapped a towel around myself, I checked my phone again. I saw 3 text messages from Jolene. "Corinne, we need to talk. This was not how we wanted you to find out. I know it is hard, but we can resolve this like adults." I stared at the words on the screen. Resolve this like adults. I held my thumb over the screen and deleted the entire thread without a second thought. She did not deserve a response. She did not deserve my anger. She deserved nothing from me. That evening, I was sitting at the kitchen island, drinking a cup of black tea, staring blankly out the window. The lock on the front door clicked. I froze. The door swung open and Harlan walked in. He was holding an empty suitcase. He still had his key. The audacity of him letting himself into my home, the home he had betrayed, was staggering. I just watched him as he walked down the hallway toward our bedroom. I put my mug down and followed him. He had the suitcase open on the bed and was throwing clothes into it haphazardly. He looked up when I stood in the doorway. He looked pathetic. He tried to explain himself while he packed, spewing the kind of empty clichés you hear in bad daytime television. "It was not planned, Corinne. It just happened." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. I did not say a word. I just watched him. He stuffed a handful of dress shirts into the bag. Jolene was going through a tough time, he mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes. She needed someone to talk to. You were always so busy with work. You were never home. He was blaming me. He was actually trying to blame me for his infidelity. I watched him, and a cold, hard clarity began forming in my mind. The numbness was receding. The tears from the morning were gone. They were replaced by a slow-burning, icy rage. I looked at this man I had shared a bed with for 4 years, and I felt absolutely nothing but contempt. "I am going to find a lawyer," I said. My voice was flat and final. It echoed in the quiet room. He stopped packing. His hands froze hovering over the suitcase. He looked at me, and I saw a flicker of genuine panic in his eyes. The reality of consequences was finally beginning to dawn on him. This was not a game. This was real life. Corinne, it does not have to be like this, he said quickly, taking a step toward me. His tone turned placating, the voice of a car salesman trying to save a deal. We can be civil. We can divide things fairly. No need to get lawyers involved and make it messy. Fairly. The word hung in the air. It was a monument to his delusion. He wanted to cheat on me with my own sister, get her pregnant, and then walk away with half of everything I had built. I did not argue with him. I did not yell. I just looked at him with an expression of pure ice. Get your things and get out, I said. Leave your key on the counter. He swallowed hard, zipped up his half-full suitcase, and practically ran out of the apartment. I heard the front door click shut, followed by the clatter of his keys hitting the granite countertop. After he left, the silence of the condo felt completely different. It felt less like emptiness and more like a clean slate. The toxic energy had left the building. I walked over to the counter, picked up his keys, and threw them in the trash can. I immediately picked up my phone and called my best friend from college, Maxine. Maxine was not just my friend. She was a shark of a family lawyer in Houston. She was the smartest, most ruthless woman I knew. I sat down at the kitchen island, the cold stone grounding me. She answered on the second ring. Corinne? Hey, what is going on? You never call this late. I took a deep breath. I told her everything. My voice was steady, relaying the facts without emotion. I told her about the dinner, the pregnancy, the 3-month affair, and his demand to divide things fairly. I spoke for 10 minutes straight without stopping. When I finished, the line was dead silent for a long moment. I could hear her breathing. Then she spoke. Her tone was completely changed. The friendly warmth was gone, replaced by the sharp edge of a professional going to war. Corinne, I am so sorry. I want to come up there and hug you, but right now we need to move past the emotion and get practical. Are you listening to me? Yes, I said. I need you to gather every single financial document you have. Bank statements, deeds, tax returns, investment portfolios, everything. Do not leave a single piece of paper unchecked. You fought for what you have. You worked yourself to the bone. You are not going to just hand over half of your life's work to the man who betrayed you with your own sister. We are going to bury him. Her words were a jolt of electricity straight to my heart. She was right. This was no longer just about a broken heart. It was a business transaction now. It was about protecting my future. I ended the call and walked straight into my home office. It was a room I had meticulously set up in the second bedroom. I was a person who thrived on organization, on control. This was my domain. I turned on the bright overhead light. I walked over to the heavy metal filing cabinet in the corner. I pulled open the top drawer and started pulling out my color-coded folders. I carried a stack of them over to my large oak desk and started laying them out. I spread them across the surface, creating a map of my entire financial life. I started with the thick green folder labeled marriage documents. I needed to see exactly when we bought certain things, what dates were on what papers. I opened the folder and pulled out our birth certificates. Then, I pulled out the official marriage certificate from Travis County. It was printed on heavy, textured paper with a gold seal at the bottom. I smoothed the paper flat on the desk. My eyes scanned the familiar document, reading the names, the dates, the signature of the officiant. But then, as I looked closer, my eyes snagged on something I had not noticed or thought about in 4 years. It was a small typed line at the very bottom, just above the official state seal. Subject to the terms of the separate property agreement filed on this date. Separate property. The words echoed in my quiet office. Separate property agreement. Why did that sound so familiar? I read the line again. I closed my eyes. And then it hit me. A memory surfacing from a deep, dusty corner of my brain. A memory so clear it was like a lightning strike illuminating a dark room. A prenuptial agreement. We had a prenup. My heart started hammering against my ribs. It was a frantic, hopeful rhythm that echoed in my own ears. I scrambled out of the office chair so fast it tipped backward and hit the wall with a loud thud. I did not even stop to pick it up. I ran down the hallway, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood floor, and went straight to my bedroom closet. I pushed aside my hanging winter coats and knelt on the floor. In the very back, hidden under a pile of old shoeboxes, was a small, heavy fireproof safe bolted to the floorboards. It had been so long since I had opened it that I stared at the metal keypad for a long moment, my mind completely blank. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my shaking fingers. I reached out and punched in the combination. It was my birthday, backward. The keypad beeped. The heavy steel door swung open with a quiet creak. I reached inside. The safe was dark and smelled faintly of old paper and dust. My fingers brushed past the thick envelope holding the deed to the condo and my passport. And then, nestled right at the bottom, I felt it. It was a thick, legal-sized envelope from the Travis County Clerk office. I pulled it out into the light of the bedroom. Printed clearly on the front were the words, "Prenuptial Agreement." Below that, it read Corinne and Harlan. My hands trembled so violently I could barely open the flap. I tore the thick paper, ripping the envelope almost in half. The hope was so intense it was actually painful. I pulled out the stack of crisp white pages. Maybe, just maybe, my younger, more cautious self had just saved me from my current nightmare. The memory came rushing back with the formal scent of the legal paper in my hands. It was a sun-drenched Saturday in April, 4 years ago, just 2 weeks before our wedding. I was 25 years old and sitting on top of the world. I had just closed on my first condo, a modern 2-bedroom place in a trendy part of downtown Austin. It was my first major asset, purchased for $550,000 with my own savings and a mortgage I qualified for entirely on my own. Harlan, meanwhile, was getting increasingly stressed about the wedding costs. They were, I had to admit, spiraling out of control. We were sitting at the kitchen table one evening, surrounded by vendor quotes. Harlan was gesturing helplessly at the papers. He told me the catering was $15,000 and the photographer was $8,000. He complained that it was more than he made in 4 months. He was not wrong. It was a massive amount of money, especially for him. He was making about $4,000 a month at the car dealership back then. It was a respectable income, but a world away from the $15,000 a month I was pulling in after a recent substantial promotion at my firm. I had reassured him, putting my arms around his neck, telling him not to worry about it. I told him I would cover the bulk of it from my salary. All that mattered was that we were celebrating our love. It was in that context of our widening financial disparity that my lawyer at the time, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Dr. Williams, had suggested the agreement. She was handling the closing on my condo. She had peered at me over her reading glasses and told me I was young, incredibly successful, and accumulating significant assets. She said a prenuptial agreement was not about mistrust. It was about smart, sensible financial planning. She called it good business. When I brought it up with Harlan that night, he literally laughed. It was a loud, barking sound that made him almost spit out his beer. A prenup? He had scoffed, shaking his head. He asked if that was not for celebrities and old billionaires who do not trust their trophy wives. He told me our love did not need a contract. I insisted gently, explaining it was just legal protection for both of us and it would make me feel more secure. He finally relented with a heavy sigh, clearly thinking I was being paranoid and overly dramatic. He called it rich people nonsense. We went to the lawyer office on a Thursday morning. I remember the day with photographic clarity because Harlan was miserably hungover. He had been out with his work buddies for a last bachelor outing and had stumbled into the apartment late the night before. He showed up to the office 15 minutes late. He looked sleepy, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was irritable. He kept complaining under his breath that he had lost an important car sale because of this stupid appointment. He was more focused on his lost commission than the document that would define our financial future. Dr. Williams, a model of professionalism, explained the basic terms with the patience of a saint. She sat across from us at her large mahogany desk and talked about the complete separation of assets. She kept her gaze fixed mainly on Harlan, trying to gauge his comprehension. She explained that this meant each of us maintains ownership of our individual property, both what we bring into the marriage and what we acquire during it. She asked him directly if he understood. Harlan waved his hand dismissively. He said yeah, he got it. He said what is mine, and what is hers. He nodded distractedly. He was already pulling out his mobile phone, sneaking a look at his text messages under the edge of the desk. It made no sense at all that he had actually understood. Harlan's eyes glazed over whenever I tried to talk about anything more complex than our monthly grocery budget. He grabbed the expensive metal pen the lawyer offered him and signed every single page. He signed all 15 pages of dense, single-spaced legal text with the casual, hurried air of someone signing a package delivery receipt. He did not read a single word. He just wanted to get it over with so he could get back to the dealership and get some greasy fast food for his headache. Driving back to my condo in my car, he had put his hand on my knee and smiled. He told me he still thought the whole contract thing was weird, but if it made me happy, that was all that mattered. He truly had not understood a single thing. To him, it was just another piece of bureaucratic paper, a meaningless formality on the path to the wedding. He had no idea that in his hungover, distracted state, he had just signed away any right to my present and my future fortune. And I, so blissfully in love and confident in our forever, did not mind his lack of attention. The contract was just a formality we would never, ever need. How tragically, beautifully wrong I was. Now, for years later, standing in the harsh overhead light of my bedroom at 3 a.m, I finally understood the profound value of that rich people nonsense. I carried the pages over to my bed and spread them out on the white duvet cover. The legal words that once seemed like dry, formal jargon now shone on the page like a sacred text. They were a declaration of my independence. I sat cross-legged on the bed and read each clause again, my heart pounding with a wild, triumphant rhythm. Clause 1. Complete separation of property. I traced the line with my index finger. Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to the marriage and, crucially, all property acquired during the marriage through individual effort, inheritance, or investment. During the marriage. My breath caught in my throat. That single phrase was my shield. It was my impenetrable fortress. The condo I had bought before we were even married, now worth $550,000. The substantial investment portfolio I funded every single month from my own salary, sitting at $150,000. The valuable stock options I received from my company. The $75,000 stake in the tech startup I had bought 2 years ago with my bonus money. The $90,000 I had in liquid savings and my paid-off car. All of it. Every single penny. It was exclusively, unequivocally, and legally mine. My total net worth was hovering around $865,000, and Harlan could not touch a single cent of it. I moved on to the next section, my eyes flying across the page. Clause 2. Dissolution of marriage. In the event of a divorce, there shall be no division of separate property. Each party shall retain the entirety of their individual assets and waive any and all claims to the assets of the other party. No division of property. He had no right to anything. Absolutely nothing. It was so clear, so absolute. I kept reading, my hands no longer trembling but steady. I was actively searching for a loophole, some obscure clause his lawyer could use against me, but there was none. Dr. Williams had drafted an ironclad, impenetrable fortress around my life work. And then I saw it. The final, beautiful nail in the coffin of their greedy little plan. Clause 3. Spousal support waiver. In consideration of the mutual waivers herein, both parties hereby knowingly and voluntarily waive any and all rights to spousal support, alimony, or maintenance from the other party, both temporary and permanent, in the event of a separation or divorce. Alimony. He had no right to ask me for a single penny of alimony. Considering the vast difference in our incomes, he would have been the one legally entitled to ask for financial support after the divorce to maintain his lifestyle. But he had signed that right away. He traded it for another beer with his buddies and a quicker exit from a boring meeting. For the first time in 3 agonizing days, a real, genuine smile spread across my face. It felt foreign, pulling at the tight skin of my cheeks, but it felt wonderful. Harlan had signed his own financial death warrant 4 years ago, and he did not even have the slightest clue. And Jolene. Oh, sweet, conniving Jolene. My mind flashed to her triumphant smile at the restaurant. She had seduced my husband, thinking he was her lottery ticket. She thought he was her golden goose, her gateway to a comfortable life funded by my sweat and sacrifice. She thought she was about to cash in on half of my assets, a prize she believed she was owed. What a delicious, spectacular, and deeply satisfying irony. Jolene did not fall in love with my husband. She fell in love with my portfolio. And they had both made a fatal, ruinous miscalculation. They had no idea about the armor of ink I had wrapped around my life all those years ago. I grabbed my mobile phone from the nightstand, my mind suddenly sharp and clear. I turned on all the lights in the condo. I felt wide awake, energized by pure adrenaline. I took clear, high-resolution photos of every single page of the contract with my phone. I made sure every signature and notary seal was perfectly visible. I opened my email and attached the images, sending them straight to my lawyer, Maxine. The subject line of the email was one word. Found. 15 minutes later, even though it was nearly 4 in the morning, my phone buzzed with her reply. Her message was short and incredibly sweet. Corinne, this changes everything. Call me the second you wake up. They have no idea what is about to hit them. The next morning, I woke up a completely different woman. The grief and shock were still there, simmering somewhere beneath the surface, but they were now overlaid with a new, powerful emotion. Resolve. A cold, hard, diamond-like resolve. I walked into my sun-drenched kitchen, the morning light pouring in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I made myself a strong cup of dark roast coffee. I stood by the glass, looking out at the beautiful Austin skyline, watching the cars crawl along the bridge over the river. I finally saw their entire scheme with perfect, terrifying clarity. Jolene's plan was not just an impulsive, passionate affair. It was a long, calculated game of greed. She saw Harlan not as a partner, but as a crowbar. He was a tool to pry open the life I had built and take what she felt she was owed. She knew she could not take my career, so she decided to take the man attached to my bank accounts. And the dinner at the Gilded Steer. It was not a desperate, tearful confession. It was a performance. It was a carefully staged piece of theater designed to humiliate me. They wanted to break me down in the most public way possible so that I would be too emotionally shattered to fight back during the divorce proceedings. They expected me to beg, to plead, to offer them anything to save my marriage or to just make the pain stop. They expected a weak victim. They were about to be very, very disappointed. I called Maxine first thing in the morning. My voice was steady and clear as I paced the length of my living room. Corinne, my girl, Maxine said, and I could hear the fierce excitement in her voice. I have reviewed the scans you sent. I read them 3 times. This contract is a work of legal art. It is completely ironclad. Harlan has no legal right to a single dime of your separate property. We can have this divorce finalized in 60 days if he does not contest it. And if he does contest it? I asked, stopping by the window to watch a bird land on the balcony railing. I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear her say it. On what grounds? Maxine scoffed loudly into the phone. He would have to prove he was coerced or mentally incompetent when he signed it, which is impossible. The notary is still practicing and remembers the meeting. He is screwed, Corinne. Plain, simple, and legally screwed. Screwed. He was screwed, and he did not even know it yet. A plan began to form in my mind. A plan for a second act to their little play. Only this time I would be the one directing. I felt a cool sense of control wash over me. Maxine, I said, my voice dropping lower. I am going to do something. I am going to call them. I am going to propose a civilized conversation about the divorce. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Corinne, are you absolutely sure? It might be simpler and emotionally safer to just let me handle everything through official channels. I can serve him papers at the car lot and be done with it. I am sure, I replied. There was a new hardness in my voice that I did not even recognize myself. They planned my public humiliation down to the last detail. I want to return the favor. I want to see their faces when they find out the truth. 3 long weeks passed. They were 3 weeks of my mother calling every other day, trying to mediate. She kept telling me to be the bigger person and think of the baby. She told me about the college fund she wanted to start for Jolene Child, asking if I would contribute. It was infuriating. Jolene had done a masterful job of painting me as the bitter, selfish older sister who cared more about her career than her family, the one who just could not accept their true love. I let her spin her web. I went to work, I hit the gym, and I waited. In the 4th week, when I knew they would be getting impatient and extremely anxious about getting their hands on the money to prepare for the baby, I finally made the call. I sat down on my couch, took a deep breath, and called Jolene. She answered on the second ring. Her voice sounded breathless, as if she had been waiting by the phone. Hello? Jolene, hi, I said. I pitched my voice carefully, softening the edges to make it sound tired, defeated, and resigned. Look, I have had a lot of time to think about this whole situation. And I think you guys are right. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing change. This was not the angry, screaming reaction she was expecting. Really? She stammered. You are okay with this? I am trying to be, I sighed heavily into the phone, putting every ounce of my acting ability into that single breath. I mean, you fell in love. It was not anyone's fault. And now there is the baby to think about. We are a family. I let that hang in the air for a second before continuing. I was thinking maybe we could meet to talk civilly about how to resolve everything without a big, messy, expensive fight in court. Just to settle things like adults, and figure out the financial division so you two can move on. Her relief was so palpable I could practically feel it radiating through the phone. Wow. Corinne, that would be really great. Harlan will be so happy. He was so worried you were going to make a scene and drag this out for years. No scene, I said smoothly. Let us meet at the Gilded Steer again. Saturday night, since that is where it all started. We can give the place a new memory. A memory of closure. Perfect, she chirped. Her voice was bright, ringing with the absolute certainty of victory. I will tell Harlan. We will see you there at 8. I hung up the phone and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. I looked around my beautiful, quiet, expensive condo. Saturday night was going to be very, very interesting. I spent the next few days in a state of hyper-focused preparation. This was not just a dinner. It was a performance, and I was the star, the director, and the producer. I went to my closet and chose my outfit with surgical precision. I bypassed the colorful dresses and pulled out an elegant, severe black dress made of a heavy crepe fabric that did not wrinkle. It had long sleeves and a high neckline. It was powerful, understated, and screamed that I was completely in control of my emotions and my bank account. I chose black leather pumps with a sharp heel. No jewelry except for my simple, genuine diamond stud earrings. I sat in front of my vanity mirror and pulled my hair back into a sleek, low ponytail, making sure not a single strand was out of place. The message was clear. I meant business. I even practiced my expression in the mirror. I worked on a mask of calm resignation, letting my shoulders droop just a fraction, making my eyes look perhaps a little sad, but ultimately accepting of my defeat. Maxine, my lawyer and my friend, thought I was playing with fire. We had a long phone call the night before the dinner. I was pacing the floor, drinking herbal tea. "Corinne, are you absolutely sure you want to do this yourself?" she had asked, her voice laced with genuine concern. It could get ugly. He could get loud, aggressive. You do not know how desperate people react when you corner them. Let him get loud, I told her, my voice perfectly steady. They deserve ugly. Besides, they are so busy planning how to spend my money and my investments, they will never suspect a thing. They think I am a broken woman coming to beg for scraps from my own table. They think I am coming to surrender. They are in for a surprise. I arrived at the Gilded Steer on Saturday, punctually at 8 o'clock in the evening. I pulled my car up to the valet, handed over the keys with a crisp tip, and walked through the heavy glass doors. The hostess recognized me immediately. Her professional smile faltered, and her face fell with a flicker of genuine pity. She obviously remembered the quiet, devastating scene from a month ago. I gave her a small, tight smile that did not reach my eyes. "A table for 3, please," I said smoothly. "Under the name Corinne." As she led me through the crowded dining room, I specifically requested the very same corner booth from that fateful night. I wanted the setting to be exactly identical. The maitre d', a kind older man named Jean-Pierre, also recognized me. He stopped by the table as I sat down and gave me a deeply sympathetic look. "I hope tonight is a much happier occasion for you, ma'am," he said in a low, discreet voice, pulling out my chair. "I have a feeling it will be, Jean-Pierre," I replied, my voice smooth as silk. I ordered a glass of iced water with lemon. If only he knew the storm that was about to hit his elegant restaurant. I sat there alone for 10 minutes. I took slow sips of the cold water, observing the room. The clinking of crystal glasses, the soft jazz playing over the speakers, the smell of roasted garlic and expensive steaks. I felt strangely calm. My heartbeat was slow and steady. The anger and grief were still there, locked away in a box inside my chest, but they had been forged into something else. They had been compressed into something sharp and focused, like a weapon waiting to be drawn. Then, they arrived. Harlan and Jolene walked into the dining room hand in hand, and the entire atmosphere around them was completely different than the last time. They were relaxed. They were smiling, leaning into each other, laughing together at some private joke. They looked exactly like a couple who had weathered a difficult storm and had now come out into the bright sunshine, completely in love and ready to claim their prize. They were no longer nervous or shifting their weight guiltily. They were triumphant. Jolene was wearing a soft pink maternity dress. It was made of a stretchy fabric that was just tight enough to proudly accentuate her small but noticeable baby bump. She walked with her hand resting lightly on her stomach, a classic motherly pose. They looked smug. They looked like they had won the lottery and were just showing up to collect the oversized check. "Corinne," Jolene said, walking up to the booth. She leaned down to give me an air kiss next to my cheek. Her perfume was cloying and sweet, smelling heavily of vanilla and desperation. "You look beautiful. So chic in black." "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice perfectly even and pleasant. "You both look well. The pregnancy really suits you, Jolene. You are glowing." "It has been wonderful," she bubbled, sliding into the leather booth. She kept her hand on Harlan's arm. "We are already thinking of names. Harlan is set on Michael if it is a boy, but I am leaning towards Gabriel. We want something strong." Harlan, playing the part of the doting future father to perfection, carefully pulled out his own chair. It was a chivalrous energy he rarely bothered to show for me in our entire 4 years of marriage. He sat down opposite me and folded his hands on the table. He gave me a look of practiced sincerity, pulling his eyebrows together in a look of deep concern. "Corinne," he said, his voice low and serious, adopting the tone of a benevolent peacemaker. "Thank you for agreeing to do this. For talking like this peacefully. I was afraid you would, hold on to the anger. Make a scene with the lawyers." I finished the thought for him, giving him that small, sad smile I had perfected in my bathroom mirror. "Do not be silly, Harlan. We are all adults here, are we not? Holding a grudge will not change the past." We ordered the exact same expensive bottle of Cabernet wine as last time. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a steak knife. They thought this was their victory lap. They truly believed this was the final, formal negotiation, where the vanquished foe gracefully surrenders the spoils of war to the victors. They had no idea they were happily walking directly into an ambush. After the waiter had poured the deep red wine, placed the bottle on the table, and retreated, Harlan cleared his throat. He was eager to get down to the business he was so desperate to conclude. He leaned forward, placing his elbows on the white tablecloth. He adopted the earnest, sincere expression he used when he was trying to close a difficult sale on a top-of-the-line, fully loaded luxury car. "So, about the divorce," he began. He exchanged a quick, highly confident glance with Jolene. It was so obvious they had rehearsed this exact conversation in her cramped apartment. "We wanted to propose doing everything amicably. No mess, no fuss. Keep the courts out of it as much as possible. We think the fairest way is to just divide things right down the middle," Jolene chimed in. 50-50. That is the standard, right? I picked up my wine glass. I took a slow, deliberate sip, letting the rich liquid coat my tongue. I watched him over the rim of the crystal glass. "Go on," I said, my voice encouragingly soft. "Tell me what you think is fair." "Well," Harlan continued, gaining momentum and confidence from my apparent compliance. "We can get the condo appraised next week and put it on the market. We sell it, pay off the remaining mortgage, and then split the cash proceeds 50-50. The investments, too. The stocks and that startup thing you bought. We can just liquidate them and divide the cash up. Simple and clean." He sat back in his chair, a self-satisfied, arrogant smile forming on his face. He looked like a man who had just solved a complex puzzle. Jolene nodded enthusiastically. Her voice was sweet and painfully reasonable. "We think that is the only fair way, Corinne. You two built a life together, after all. You shared a home." And, Harlan added, his tone becoming a little more serious, a little more demanding. With your new promotion and that fantastic new $20,000 a month salary, we were thinking some temporary alimony would really help. Just until I can get stabilized with Jolene and the baby. It would just be for a year or two. Just a couple of $1,000 a month to help us get on our feet and get a bigger place. Alimony. He really believed it. He believed with every fiber of his cheating being that I was going to sell my home, give him half my life savings, and then pay him a monthly allowance while he started a brand new life with my sister, raising their child in a house I paid for. The sheer, unadulterated, breathtaking nerve of it was almost impressive. It was a level of entitlement that defied logic. I let the silence hang in the air for a long, agonizing moment. I let them sit with their ridiculous demands. The jazz music played softly in the background. The waiter walked by with a tray of sizzling steaks. I slowly reached down to my black leather purse sitting on the seat next to me. My movements were calm, deliberate, and smooth. They both watched my hands, their eyes gleaming with hungry anticipation. They looked like two starving wolves waiting for a piece of meat to be thrown to them. They probably thought I was pulling out a fancy pen, ready to scribble my pathetic agreement on a cocktail napkin. They thought I was going to ask where to sign. Instead, my fingers closed around the thick, heavy, legal-sized envelope. I pulled it out of my purse and brought it up above the edge of the table. I placed it directly in the center of the white tablecloth, right between my wine glass and the bread basket. The crisp, heavy paper made a dry, definitive thwack as it hit the dark wood beneath the cloth. It was the only sound in a suddenly silent world. It sounded exactly like the sound of a guillotine blade dropping. If you've made it this far, please do me a favor, like the video and comment number 1 down below. It lets me know how awesome you are and shows that you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a massive encouragement and truly motivates me. Drop that one so I can recognize you, and now, let's get back to my story. Before we talk about division of any assets, I said. My voice was no longer soft or accommodating. It was dangerously quiet. All traces of the sad, resigned sister were entirely gone, replaced by something cold, hard, and utterly unforgiving. I sat up perfectly straight, rolling my shoulders back. I need to clarify something very important that you both seem to have completely forgotten about, I stated, looking back and forth between them. Harlan frowned. The smug smile vanished from his face. He looked down at the thick envelope as if it were a venomous snake preparing to strike. What is that? He asked, his voice suddenly wary and defensive. Our prenuptial agreement, Harlan, I said. I looked him directly in the eye, holding his gaze with absolute authority until he physically flinched and looked away. Remember the one you signed 4 years ago in Dr. Williams' office? The morning you were nursing a massive hangover from your bachelor party? The document you called rich people nonsense? The color drained from his face so fast it was like watching a time-lapse video of a flower wilting and dying. He went from a healthy, tanned, confident man to a pasty, sickly, sweaty gray in a matter of 5 seconds. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He stared at the envelope in horror. Jolene looked frantically from me to him, her brow furrowed in utter, panicked confusion. What agreement? She demanded, her voice sharp and high-pitched. She grabbed his arm. Harlan, you made a prenuptial agreement? You never told me that. We did, I said calmly, my gaze never leaving Harlan's panicked, sweating face. And he signed all 15 pages of it without even bothering to read a single word. Because he thought he knew better than the lawyers. I reached forward and pulled the pages out of the torn envelope. I spread them out flat on the table, right over the pristine white cloth, spreading them like a winning hand of poker so they could both clearly see the legal text and the black ink signatures at the bottom. I pointed my manicured index finger to the first bolded heading on page 1. Complete separation of assets. Do you remember what that means, Harlan? I asked, my voice dripping with icy condescension. Or were you too busy checking your mobile phone under the table that day to listen to the woman explaining your financial future? His hands were visibly trembling as he reached out and awkwardly picked up the first 2 pages. The paper shook in his grip. His eyes darted frantically across the dense legal lines, trying desperately to process the terms he had so arrogantly and foolishly ignored 4 years ago. He was breathing heavily through his nose. Now hold on a minute, Corinne, Jolene said. Her voice was rapidly losing its confident, sweet edge as she tried to violently take control of a situation that was rapidly spinning out of her greedy grasp. She leaned over the table, glaring at me. Even with some kind of old agreement, you two were married for 4 years. This is Texas. There is community property. There is a legal division of assets acquired during the marriage. You cannot just keep everything. Not when there is a complete separation of assets clause, Jolene, I cut her off instantly. My voice was as sharp and clean as a surgeon's scalpel. I tapped my finger hard on the specific clause on page 2, right in front of her face. It is right here in black and white, I instructed her. Read it. Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to the marriage and all property acquired during the marriage. I looked at both of them, making sure they heard every single word. That means the condo I bought. The investment portfolio I funded. The stock options I earned. The startup equity. Everything I earned with my brain, my stress, and my hard work stays entirely with me. It is my property. You get 0. This cannot be legal. Harlan finally exploded. His voice cracked, rising an entire octave in panic. He slammed his open hand down on the table, rattling the heavy silverware and drawing shocked stares from the neighboring booths. People were turning their heads, but I did not care. Let them look. Let them see him fall apart. The condo. The investments. I lived there for 4 years. I contributed to the household expenses. He yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. You contributed $300 a month for groceries and gas, Harlan, I said calmly. My voice was a low, steady counterpoint to his rising, pathetic hysteria. I paid the $2,000 mortgage every single month, on time, strictly from my own separate bank account. I paid the condo association fees. I paid for the electricity, the water, the internet, the property taxes, the insurance. Your $300 a month does not magically give you property rights over a $550,000 asset. That is not how math works, and that is certainly not how the law works. Jolene was now frantically flipping through the remaining pages on the table. Her eyes were completely wild, her face pale and sweaty. She was searching desperately for a loophole, a lifeline, some hidden escape clause from the financial nightmare that was unfolding before her very eyes. Her dreams of a big house and easy money were turning to ash. But alimony. She shrieked, her voice thin and reedy, bordering on a sob. He has a right to alimony. You make $20,000 a month. He makes barely 5. You owe him support. I gave her a slow, freezing cold smile. It absolutely did not reach my eyes. An excellent point, Jolene, I said smoothly. Please turn to page 5, section 3. She scrambled to find the page, her hand shaking so badly she dropped it back onto the table. It is titled Spousal Support Waiver, I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. Allow me to read it aloud for both of you, since reading comprehension does not seem to be a strong suit here. I picked up the page and read the words clearly. Both parties hereby knowingly and voluntarily waive any and all rights to spousal support, alimony, or maintenance. I dropped the paper back onto the table. Harlan waived his right to ever ask me for alimony when he put his neat little signature on this exact line right here. I pointed to his messy scrawl at the bottom of the page. He gave it away. I did not know what I was signing. Harlan yelled, his face contorted with a hideous mixture of blind panic and impotent rage. His chest was heaving. You tricked me. You set me up. This is a trick. I tricked you? I asked, my voice dropping dangerously low. I leaned forward over the table, resting my arms on the wood, channeling the energy of a predator finally cornering its prey. Harlan, you were a 30-year-old grown man sitting in a licensed attorney office. She explained every single clause in plain, simple English. You looked at her, and you said, and I quote, yeah, makes sense. What is mine is mine. There are witnesses to that meeting. The notary stamped it. It is officially registered at the downtown courthouse. It is exactly as legal and as binding as the marriage vows you so casually threw away in my sister bed. The expression on Jolene's face was a slow-motion car crash of emotions. It morphed from arrogant confusion to terrified disbelief to pure, unadulterated horror. The brutal reality of their situation, the catastrophic, total failure of her grand master plan, was finally hitting her like a speeding freight train. You mean, he gets nothing? She whispered. The words were barely audible over the background noise of the restaurant. Her dream of a comfortable, wealthy life funded by my bank accounts was dissolving into thin air right before her eyes. Nothing, I confirmed cheerfully. I started gathering the pristine white pages, organizing them back into a neat stack, and sliding them carefully back into their thick envelope. 0. Zilch. Nada. Not one single red cent. I looked at Harlan, taking in his ruined posture. Harlan leaves this marriage exactly as he entered it 4 years ago. With his financed pickup truck, his cheap collection of polo shirts, and his own significant, growing credit card debts. Harlan groaned and buried his face in his hands, resting his elbows on his knees under the table. He was finally, truly understanding the catastrophic, life-ruining scale of his miscalculation. He had traded a secure, wealthy future for a cheap affair, and now he was going to pay the price. "Corinne, for God's sake," he pleaded. His voice was muffled by his palms, wet with tears of self-pity. "We can talk about this. There has to be a way. You cannot just leave me with nothing. You know my salary. I cannot afford an apartment right now. I am going to have a child to support. Please." I stood up from the table. I picked up my purse and slipped the envelope inside. I looked down at him, devoid of any sympathy, pity, or mercy. "No, Harlan," I said, emphasizing each word so it would burn into his memory. "You are going to have a child to support." I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, meant only for the two of them. "Which brings me to my final point. Child support?" Jolene's head snapped up. Her tear-filled eyes were wide with fresh, raw terror. "Child support?" "Of course," I said, feigning complete surprise at her apparent ignorance of family law. "The father has a strict legal obligation to pay child support to the mother when they are not married or when they eventually split. And let us be honest, you two will not last. Here in Texas, the legal guideline is typically 20% of the non-custodial parent net income for one child." I pulled my mobile phone out of my purse and opened the calculator application, making a grand show of tapping in the numbers. "Let us do the math, shall we?" I asked brightly. "You earn what?" "Let us be generous and say $5,500 a month gross at the car lot. After taxes and deductions, that is about $4,200 net. 20% of that is exactly $840. I showed them the glowing screen of my phone with the number displayed in large font. "Every single month, Harlan, that money will be legally garnished. It will be coming directly out of your paycheck and going straight to Jolene's bank account. Every single month, until your child turns 18 years old. You will barely have enough left to pay for your own gas and rent." They stared at each other in stunned, completely panicked silence. The air between them was toxic. They were partners in crime, and they were just now realizing that their grand heist had failed, and one of them was going to have to financially bleed the other dry to survive their shared transgression for the rest of their natural lives. The irony was exquisite, a perfectly crafted karmic joke. I did not wait for them to respond. I turned around and walked away from the table. Walking out of the Gilded Steer for the second and final time was like stepping out of a long, dark, suffocating tunnel into the bright, warm sunlight. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and took a deep breath of the Texas night air. I did not look back. I did not feel sadness. I did not feel anger anymore. I just felt a profound, cleansing sense of absolute liberation. I walked to the valet stand, tipped the driver, and got into my car. Sitting in the quiet sanctuary of the leather interior, I finally allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. I gripped the steering wheel and let out a laugh. A real, loud, joyful laugh. They had tried to destroy me. They had tried to break me down and take everything I had built. And in the end, they had only managed to spectacularly, entirely destroy themselves. The divorce was finalized in exactly 62 days. Just as Maxine had confidently predicted, Harlan did not contest a single thing. His lawyer, no doubt after taking one single look at the ironclad prenuptial agreement, had probably sat him down and told him he did not have a legal leg to stand on, and fighting it would only bankrupt him further with legal fees. He signed the final divorce papers quietly. And with the dead, suffocating weight of that toxic marriage officially and legally cut away from my life, I did not just recover. I skyrocketed. It was as if all the mental and emotional energy I had been pouring into keeping that failing relationship afloat was suddenly redirected entirely into my own life, my own goals, my own ambitions. I poured everything I had into my new role as commercial director. I did not just meet my corporate targets. I absolutely shattered them. In my first 6 months in the position, I worked tirelessly and secured a massive partnership deal that was the largest in the company's entire history. I was flying first class to London, to Tokyo, making high-level deals and building a formidable name for myself in the industry. The performance bonuses that came with that massive success were staggering. My monthly income in some strong quarters soared past $30,000. The tech startup I was a partner in landed a massive new round of venture capital funding, tripling the cash value of my original stake overnight. By the time I celebrated my 30th birthday, sitting on a beach in Greece, my total net worth had crossed the $2 million mark. That October, I decided it was time to fully close the door on the past. I sold the condo I had shared with Harlan. The moment the sale officially closed and the funds hit my account, I felt a final, profound sense of release. It was cleansing, like shedding an old, heavy skin. I sold it for a significant profit and immediately bought a new place. I paid $900,000, entirely in cash, for a stunning 2-story loft in a brand new downtown high-rise. It had a private terrace with a breathtaking, panoramic view of the river and the city skyline. I then hired a top-tier interior designer and spent another $200,000 renovating the loft from top to bottom, turning it into my absolute dream home. It featured a sleek, modern kitchen, a private gym room, and a massive home office enclosed in glass where I could continue to build my empire. My new home was so spectacular it was actually featured on a multi-page spread in a local home and design magazine. At 30 years old, I had achieved the American dream entirely on my own terms, with my own 2 hands. I traveled to Europe 3 times that year. I walked the streets of Paris, ate pasta in Rome, and drank wine in Barcelona. I traveled always alone, always flying first class, always staying in the most luxurious 5-star hotels. I bought myself a classic, expensive watch, not because I needed to know the time, but simply because I wanted it and I could afford it. I dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, savoring every bite. I shopped in high-end boutiques without ever looking at the price tags. The crushing loneliness I thought I would inevitably feel, the dark emptiness I had deeply dreaded after the divorce, simply never came. After the searing, burning sting of betrayal finally faded, the profound peace of solitude was almost addictive. I did not have to explain my choices to a husband. I did not have to justify my expenses to a greedy sister. My life was finally, completely, and entirely my own. I also started attending therapy. I did not go out of sadness or depression, but for personal growth. My therapist helped me unpack not just the betrayal of my marriage, but the years of toxic family dynamics I had mistakenly confused for love and duty. She told me I had grown up believing I had to be the provider and the savior for everyone around me, constantly fixing their mistakes. She asked me when the last time someone truly took care of me was. That question broke me open, and I cried for 15 minutes straight in her office. I realized it was time to put myself first, to discover who I was when I was not propping up other people's lives. And that is exactly what I did. Eventually, I also found a real, genuine partner. I met Daniel at a charity art gallery opening in downtown Austin. He was a successful, independent architect. A kind, highly intelligent man with a quick laugh and a quiet, solid confidence. He had his own successful firm, his own ambitions, his own established life. Our relationship was not built on financial need, emotional dependency, or hidden agendas. It was built on a strong foundation of mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine, equal partnership. We were 2 whole, independent people actively choosing to build something new and beautiful together. There was no financial imbalance for anyone to exploit. There were no hidden resentments. There were no games. Meanwhile, through the inevitable, gossipy grapevine of family, mostly through my mother, worried, whispered phone calls, I followed the slow-motion car crash of Harlan and Jolene new life. I watched it unfold from a safe, sterile, completely detached distance. It was exactly as I had predicted at the restaurant. It was a perfect, miserable storm entirely of their own making. The local economy took a slight downturn that year, and the market for the expensive luxury cars Harlan sold softened significantly. His commission-based salary, which had been financially precarious even in the best of economic times, absolutely plummeted. According to my mother, he was barely clearing $3,000 a month. After the strict, court-ordered child support of $840 was automatically deducted from his paycheck by the state every single month, there was very little cash left for him to live on, let alone support a new family unit. Jolene had their baby, a little girl. Their grand dream of buying a comfortable family home in Austin was the very first casualty of their reality. They could not even afford the rent on a standard two-bedroom apartment in the city. So, with no other options, Jolene and the baby had to move back home with our parents in their small, aging house in San Antonio. Our parents, who were retired and living strictly on a fixed income, were suddenly thrust into supporting 3 adults and an infant on my father's meager accountant pension. The financial and emotional strain on them was immense and constant. Harlan tried desperately to get a job transfer to a car dealership in San Antonio to be closer to them and save money, but nothing was available. So, he was forced to make the grueling, soul-crushing hour-and-a-half commute each way, every single day, driving his gas-guzzling pickup truck. He was burning through expensive gas money he could not afford, leaving the house long before dawn and getting back long after the baby was already asleep for the night. My mother would call me, her voice full of a deep sympathy I absolutely could not muster. She told me he seemed so tired lately, so completely defeated. She said Jolene was trying to find more freelance design clients, but it was impossible with a screaming newborn and no money for childcare. Eventually, the pressure cooker situation at my parents' house exploded. It became entirely untenable. Harlan and Jolene were forced to move out. They did not move into a nice starter home or even a decent, clean apartment complex. They moved into a rented, rusted single-wide trailer in a run-down, dusty park on the absolute outskirts of San Antonio. It cost them $600 a month for a tiny, cramped metal box with paper-thin walls and a perpetually leaky roof. It was literally all they could afford. My mother said they fought constantly. They were vicious, ugly, screaming fights entirely about money. He blamed her for pushing for the divorce so aggressively, for being so blinded by her greed that she never considered the possibility of a legal document like a prenuptial agreement protecting my assets. She blamed him for being a lousy, lazy salesman, for losing his good standing at the luxury dealership due to his poor performance and exhaustion, and for not being able to provide her with the wealthy life she felt she was naturally owed. The grand, all-consuming love that had supposedly justified their horrific betrayal had completely curdled. It turned into bitter, daily resentment, constant blame, and deep regret. It turned out their great, star-crossed passion could not survive the harsh, grinding reality of a shared bank account that was perpetually overdrawn and a life lived in a metal box. Over the years, Jolene sent me a few desperate, rambling text messages in the middle of the night. The messages evolved quickly from half-hearted, self-serving apologies to direct, begging pleas for money. She wrote that she knew she messed up, but her daughter was my niece, an innocent child. She begged me to at least help pay for the doctor bills or buy groceries. She complained that Harlan's new job at a shady used car lot did not pay enough and they could not cover everything. I read the messages sitting on my beautiful terrace, sipping expensive wine. A strange sense of complete detachment washed over me. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. I blocked her number for good. Her terrible choices were not my emergency to fix. On the 3rd anniversary of the betrayal, a day I no longer marked with sadness, but with a quiet sense of deep gratitude for the freedom it had ultimately brought me, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Harlan. He wrote, "Corinne. I know you have no reason to ever want to talk to me again, but I need to say something. You were right. You were right about everything. About me, about Jolene, about the money. I was a weak, foolish, stupid man, and I destroyed the absolute best thing I ever had in my entire life. I am so sorry. I hope you are happy. You deserve it. Reading that message did not bring me a sudden surge of smug satisfaction or a flare of lingering anger. It just brought a quiet, final sense of complete closure. He had finally, painfully understood the massive magnitude of what he had thrown away. But it was years too late. I had moved on so completely, had built a life so incredibly full and rich, that his apology felt like a letter addressed to a person who simply no longer existed. He was a ghost from a past life. I looked at the message for a moment, took a deep breath of the fresh air, and then I deleted it without responding. Today, I look back at that horrible, devastating night at the Gilded Steer, and I see it for what it truly was. It was the absolute best gift life could have ever given me. It was a painful, brutal, and entirely necessary catalyst. It forced me to discover the true depth of my own strength and resilience. It taught me the most valuable lesson I will ever learn, that my dignity, my boundaries, and my self-respect are strictly non-negotiable. My story is not about revenge. It is about justice. It is about the profound, beautiful, and liberating lesson that when you finally stop propping up people who only want to use you and drain your resources, you have so much more energy left. You have so much more strength and time left to build something truly extraordinary and beautiful for yourself.